So when I was engaged, a man from Indonesia who was in a training with me at Save the Children told me this excellent proverb. And whenever anyone gets married, I tell them this. And he said, when two men are in a boat, only one can stand up at a time. And that just became like the philosophy my husband and I had about our careers. Like we both worked. I mean, I went back to work when my first son was like 4 months old. But we just had this thing of like, I mean, I was pretty sure I wanted to work, which I think until you actually like look at your baby, there are people who think they're going to go back to work and then they look and they're like, no, I don't want to go back to work. So that aside, like once you made that decision, we just had it, you know, it's like if he was unhappy in his career and he was going to be looking around, like I had to be seated in the boat, we would say that. And if I felt like I was getting unhappy and I was thinking about leaving, I would say to him, are you seated in the boat? Because I might start looking. And I don't know. You know, I'm a person who I just listened to this thing by, I'm forgetting his name, Adam Grant. So Adam Grant, who is a Wharton professor who writes a lot about workplace psychology. He's a workplace psychology expert. He wrote a book called Givers and Takers. So I think I'm a person who's like always thinking about not just what might be next to me, but like what might be next for someone else. Like if somebody, one of my kids' friends or a friend tells me they're looking for a job, like I feel like I'm looking for that job with that person too. I got a job ad, I send it to them, not just from CMMB, from anywhere, because I follow like a number of different things. So I think one, being open to a lot of possibilities. I think, you know, realizing early in my career, like 28 or when I was about 28 or 30, I used to run like a lunch group of women, since we are a lot of women on this call actually. And they were all people in international something, but we used to kind of coach each other about how do you get past that program assistant title, or how do you get past this thing? And I would just always say we are all on the way to the perfect job, because I would evaluate any job. Like, was it going to give me new knowledge? Was it going to give me new contacts? Like, why would I take a job running a conference? Like, I actually did not know anything about running a conference, but I thought like, this is going to give me a whole bunch of contacts in the reproductive health field. And I'm going to be a catbird seat to political, you know, efforts around reproductive health for women globally. Like, what a great thing to do for 18 months of my life. It was only 18 months. Like, I knew it was a time limited job and I'd have to look for a job again. But so if it was going to give me new skills, new contacts, you know, that was like how I kind of evaluated jobs. So I think there's a very good book called The Defining Decade by a psychologist named Meg Jay. And it's all about your 20s and what you should be doing in your 20s. And it's like building career capital, building social capital, building, you know, I don't mean to think we can all plan our lives, because I just said that the spirit sort of guided me into this job. But I have like to your point, Mark, I have a lot of faith that God puts things in my path for a reason. But I also have a little bit of a desire to over control things. I think my kids would tell you that too. So just like, still, but it's about being open. Like even with my kids, I would say to them, like, you can always walk past a door in a hallway, but you should be doing everything you can to make sure there are other doors open down the hallway. So that's sort of a little bit about my philosophy on career management. It's like, you got to be open. You can do different things, but I wouldn't do something that was going to like take me way off track. I would keep trying to look. But if you're sort of stuck and you feel like, oh, this is a job, you know, you just have to, it requires a kind of rationalization and a thinking about, is it going to help introduce me to people who might help me get the next job? Is it going to, you know, help me learn some skills I can apply in the next job, like fundraising skills? Like, it's might not be what you want to do your whole life, but it's such a good skill base. Like, everybody always looking for someone who can do some fundraising or proposal writing or proposal review, monitoring and evaluation. People are always looking for somebody who can look at data, who can do infographics with data, who can reshape things. So that's sort of how I would think about it as you're kind of pursuing things. First of all, I think it really depends on the corporation. I think we kind of have a hard time finding the perfect company. I don't know, but I do have a sense of that corporate social responsibility is really important. And I just have a feeling like in the SDGs now, it's so apparent, like everyone in, you know, if you look at the globe, the effects of corporations are tremendous. Like and many corporations are way bigger than a whole lot of government, incomes. So to not try and engage with corporations, I think is a mistake if you want to change the world, even in small ways, right? Like even what you choose to buy. Like for Lent, I decided to stop using body wash, which doesn't mean I'm not showering. I'm using bar soap, but just the whole thing of like, why am I using something that's coming in a plastic bottle when you could use something that's coming in a paper? It's like, it's being conscientious about the decisions that corporations are making that are polluting our planet or making these distinctions. So I could have stayed at Johnson & Johnson. I mean, if I went out and did meetings. I've done a lot of, sometimes corporations would invite me in with a group of people to kind of think with them about a corporate social responsibility platform. So I spent some time, I'm forgetting which oil company out in California, the one that's in Northern California. Oh, geez, I'm going to blank. It's in a beautiful place, like it looked great and stuff. And it's like other people might not have taken the meeting, like not have agreed to go and try and advise an oil company about how to make a difference in health. But I was just like, well, they're doing things that are probably damaging human health. I think someone here said they were going into environmental health or was thinking about it. Was it you, Sheree? If we don't try and help them get closer to doing things healthfully, it will make a huge difference, and I also had one crazy opportunity to meet a guy named Paul Pullman, who is the head of Unilever. And he was like one of the leaders on the Paris Accords from the corporate side. I mean, there really are some corporate leaders out there who really meaningfully engage in trying to push the world forward on issues. So I think it would be, when you walk into J&J, they have something called the Credo. If you know anything about Johnson & Johnson, they have a Credo if you go to their website. And you just walk in and you believe. And I did a whole campaign on supporting health workers, trying to elevate and celebrate health workers. We gave awards. We had all this crazy stuff happening around the world for health workforce. But this was before COVID. That was one reason I almost had to come back here, come back to global health, is because I created a campaign like 8 years ago to celebrate frontline health workers. And then because of COVID, like suddenly the world was waking up to what we were trying to convince the world 8 years ago, that there's no defense without health workers. There's no, your first defense is your midwife. It's the person who catches you when you come out, kind of thing. And I just felt like, how are we celebrating these people? How are we elevating? How are we paying them? How are we honoring them? All of those things. So, and J&J was very involved in that. And that's like their big corporate social responsibility priority now is health workers. And it's just amazing that if you've seen the nursing commercials that they do and stuff, I'm not a nurse, I'm not a clinician. So I was like the perfect person to like promote health workers, because I wasn't really one. I just really thought like the world is so undervaluing these people. So I think they can make a tremendous amount of difference. I would not think it was selling out if a person with a real passion for this stuff went and worked inside a corporation, even if you went and worked on diversity and inclusion inside a corporation, even if you went and worked on public health or corporate social responsibility, and you'll know within a short amount of time if you're not in the right place. Like if everyone's not sincere. I mean, honestly, people at J&J, I felt like a lot of them were really sincere, so. But I mean, we do have, it's an industry that is changing. And that's another part of our strategic plan, is really trying to think about how the industry is changing. Like how many expatriates do we need in global public health planning? Like it's a real reality check, because there are now public health schools around the world. There are now lots of health professionals and stuff. And so even now I'm kind of grappling with, like, I know why I wanted to do this, but was I always doing it in the right way? Was I doing it in ways that promoted colonialism? I mean, I have a whole, deep think to do personally, as our whole industry does. And there's some really good podcasts out there about this whole issue. One that's called Rethinking Humanitarianism, if you're interested to listen to how the humanitarian field is likely to change in the next 10 or 20 years to try and, but there's still a reality of where wealth is concentrated, that's still going to be part of the aid system. So then within global health, I mean, there's just so many new things now, like environmental health, such a huge issue. Like when you look at, where people live, you look at a map of poverty, and then the kinds of illnesses that are associated with poverty in this country by zip code, right? Asthma and exposures and all sorts of things. Like, we have so much homework to do on just looking at zip codes and how that differentially affects maternal mortality, how it differentially affects other illnesses, et cetera. So I guess, and I guess the other thing, I just wouldn't think like your major within a public health program is going to necessarily define your job. In fact, it just doesn't have to. So if you decide to study environmental health, but you did an internship on this, or you did, there's a lot of ways to kind of talk your way into a broader job or into so I would go with where I felt like the faculty was really good. They're working on interesting projects. Like, try and find out what the faculty are sort of studying, something sort of keeps your interest. If you select the program that you're going to get a lot of, you could but you're going to learn some other things. And this work, things you have to take anyway. So is that helpful?
That was super helpful. Thank you very much.
And if anyone is like, I'd love to just talk to about these options. Like, I'm happy to do that. I mean, it's they're hard choices and they're big investments. So you want to try and pick something. I mean, I'm a big fan. I don't know if anyone here has a master's in international affairs, but I'm a big fan of getting a practical degree, because it's sometimes so hard to find a job if you have a master's in international affairs. So even though I went to an undergraduate in international affairs, like, yeah, I know, sorry, but it's just like why I try and get people to go to public health school, or even an MBA or an MPA, a public administration degree, because it's just, people want to think that you're skilled, not just knowledgeable about the world or something. I don't know, at that master's level. So some things that I think are really helpful. I mean, actually, when I was in high school, I did competitive public speaking. I think public speaking, you just cannot imagine how important it is. And the one thing, like, since you're watching me on Zoom, like, I use a huge amount of facial expressions, because I did anyone else do public speaking? Come on, be honest, like debate or forensics, anyone else public speaking? So when you're in forensics, it's not acting. You're not allowed to like walk around the stage and do much. So almost all of your conveying of emotion has to be like in the tone of your voice and in your like facial movements. So I would always get on my ballots, great facial expressions. But now that I'm a professional, I think I use too many. I'm like too exaggerated or something like that. But I completely think public speaking or forcing yourself to do, and if you're really not comfortable doing it, it's really worth joining Toastmasters or some group where you have to get out of your comfort zone and do it, because it's useful when you do a job interview. It's useful if you ever have to lead a team, it's useful. So I'd say that's like the most important skill that who knew, like when I was engaging in this in high school, that it was going to be so important to your career. But I think being able to communicate is one of those things that just really helps you, especially if you want to lead a team. And the other thing, we just did an exercise at the senior team, and I had done the same exercise when I was at the Dalio Foundation, and both times I scored the same. So lots of people who are leaders are very like strong and aggressive leaders. I don't test that way. I test as I'm a person who is what's called a counselor. So there's like 4 things you could be. You could be a director. It's called the Stratton test, if anyone's ever taken it. It's one of the personality tests that's only like $10. That's why a lot of people take Stratton as opposed to Myers-Briggs or something super expensive. So Stratton tells you if you're a counselor or a persuader, or a director or a number cruncher. So I'm a counselor, which means like I tend to be like the glue. I try and bring people together around an idea, like build consensus or something. And like when I first got my results, I was like, oh geez, I'm not a good person to lead a team, because like a leader has to be out there. There were other people who had that profile. But in fact, I think sometimes that's a really helpful thing, especially at a time like we're in at CMMB, where we need to be reflective, where we can't say we have all the answers, where we're really trying to listen to the field and be the glue to kind of keep this organization together. So again, maybe that's, I think whatever your skill profile is or your style of leadership is as a woman, I wouldn't say there's only one style that can do it. Because I remember when I found this out, I thought, oh geez, I'll never be in charge or something like that the first time I took the test. But then I realized, well, there's some advantages sometimes to having that personality profile. So think about it. It's not, it's not necessarily one type of leader.